Welcome to another edition of the Injury Prevention Academy, brought to you by DORN Companies. For over 20 years, DORN has been the nation's leading wellness-based pain management and injury prevention company. Through our customized ergonomic education, training, and tech solutions, DORN has helped nearly 120,000 employees over that time. With an annual ROI of nearly 600%, we have saved employers over $100 million in workers' comp and healthcare costs. I'll be your host, Cheryl Roy, and we will be diving into the various facets of all things safety in the working environment. Welcome back to another edition of the Injury Prevention Academy. I'm Cheryl, and with me today is Miss Lisa Krefft. She works with a company called 3Motion AI. She has over 25 years of experience in direct-to-employer services and consulting. Lisa is a passionate advocate for proactive mental and physical health for individuals and just organizations in general. With expertise in health tech, ergonomics, and risk management, she delivers data-driven and customized solutions that help reduce human and economic costs of injuries, enhance productivity, and foster resilience. Welcome, Miss Lisa.
It's my pleasure, Cheryl. Thank you for asking me to join you.
I'm very excited to have you here. So why don't we just dive right into it? Can you start by sharing a little bit about your journey into the field of AI, artificial intelligence, for those who don't know? I know it began with work as an OT that led to the world of emerging health and tech startups, and then eventually got you to a law degree.
Yeah, so as an occupational therapist specializing in employer services, I've been testing and integrating emerging technologies, which has been cornerstone really to my journey to continuously seek solutions that deliver the best outcomes for my clients. After spending close to 10 years working with Fortune 1000 employers, implementing and managing on-site and near-site early intervention programs, I dove into exclusively working with employers, testing and implementing emerging technology solutions. But there are a lot of questions and a lot of obstacles that I didn't have answers to. I had 3 children at the time who were going back to school and thought I was going to be an empty nester. And it seemed like, hey, if we're going to have 3 in college, why not 4? And I looked at some options and really found a program that explicitly fit, what I was looking for. During that time, I explored an advanced degree. I was introduced to Northwestern Law School's Masters of Science in Law program. It's a cross-functional degree between law, business, and medical schools that addresses the laws and regulations, IP, contracting, all things related to the business of entrepreneurship with AI and technology. This broadened my perspective in ways that I didn't anticipate and skill set at a crucial time when the uptake of AI was really taking off. Like, who knew that I really found data science intriguing and some things that perhaps I hadn't thought about. But the plus and minus of going back to school is that, your perspective is broadened. And at the same time, like, you realize how much there is that you don't actually know.
I would like to start off by saying good for you for going back to school, and for everybody out there. School is for everyone. Education is for anyone. Does not matter where you're at in life, how old you are, anything. Like, knowledge is power. And I think that's wonderful that you did that. So good for you.
And shocking, I wasn't even the oldest in my class. Like, the age range was really literally 18 to 73. So
and that's how it should be, frankly. So
was going to school with doctors that I treated patients for like decades ago. It's, and I think everyone is really interested in technology and the way it enhances our lives and what the implications are with technology and AI to our lives, both personally and professionally.
and honestly, like, I think AI has moved so much more in advancement. I mean, I think, 15, 20 years ago, AI was, whatever you were watching on Terminator in the movie theater, and that's what all the advancements were. But obviously, with your vast experience, it's evolved over the years in the workspace environment these days. How do you see that taking place as far as how AI is coming into the workforce?
Well, I think what AI is meant to do is AI, and I do believe, the younger generations expect this. AI is meant to make our lives simpler. And it's meant to make our lives simpler so that we can focus our professional energies on the interactions and what we're more accustomed to do, like taking away the busy work, more or less.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just in the US. Is it better accepted or utilized in other countries, or how is that unfolding throughout the world?
With the uptake in AI, I've noticed that projects with employers have transitioned more quickly than expected from regional to national to global. Uh,
Hmm.
Along that, with that comes differences in regulations and compliance that it's important to be aware of. From a global perspective, countries are competing to balance the need to regulate AI without hindering innovation. So just like within the US, certain regions are considered innovation hubs, like Chicago or San Francisco. But in
Hmm.
with global companies, their leaders in innovation come from different countries and parts of the world. There are several indexes that aim to rank countries in terms of innovation. So, according to this one, the most innovative countries in 2023 by the Visual Capitalist are Switzerland, Sweden, the US, UK, and then Singapore. And the one I've heard most about recently is the Netherlands. It's a perfect example of the challenge with data. Like, you have to have good data in to get quality data out. So understanding the research behind it, who owns it, the methodology and the use case is important when we're evaluating any type of technology and how we implement it.
So, as of right now, to your understanding, is there an actual regulation, or is it still kind of the Wild West on how it's being integrated right now? I know there's different levels of different progresses on whether it's how it's being regulated in general. Is it still kind of being figured out, or is there any country ahead of another that's got some like rules in place?
Well, there are most definitely rules in place, and as early as 2020, the U.S. had the National AI Initiative Act,
Mhm.
which really looked at what research and guardrails that we were going to be putting around AI. And so there are various consumer privacy and protection acts, the global AI and law. I actually, as I was doing a little bit of research for this chat, there's a global AI law and policy tracker. So I continuously have different articles I'm reading about EU compliance in the US. And the mandate with the US is supposed to be set by December of this year.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
literally 4 years of research and coming out. So we're seeing the White House come out with different AI regulations and initiatives around um, equity, equity in AI, around how to
Hmm.
use it, around privacy. And we see so many examples of this. And AI is here whether we're ready for it or not. We
Oh,
see it
yeah.
in personal lives all the time. Like I personally, when I was choosing a, a system for my house, like I have no cameras within my house because
Hmm.
like there has to be some type of sanctuary where you're not subject to being videotaped or your picture being taken. And this came out for us as a family. My husband has over 30 years in the fire service, and this started happening. I don't really remember how long ago, but they would be on an accident scene, and as they were helping people in the midst of maybe the worst moments of their life, everybody was there taking pictures and video.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's sort of like, where is the expectation of privacy and decency, and where are those lines? And the firefighters frequently had to create like barricades with the trucks or stand around victims so that, perhaps the first view someone might have of their loved one who's injured isn't off of somebody else's cell phone.
Oh, God. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really a matter of like protecting that privacy and where we have a reasonable expectation of privacy in terms of what we do.
Oh, that's crazy.
Is
So I'm assuming there's challenges that come along with this as well. I know that studies show that 1 in 4 US workers are worried that they might lose their job if they don't get on board with AI or have it somehow enmeshed into their daily jobs. I mean, frankly, who can blame them? I know AI is already starting to replace some human workers. About 7% of US workers have seen their fellow coworkers get replaced by AI. How do you see AI evolving in that arena?
So AI is creating efficiencies and changes in our processes that we're aware of and that we have yet to imagine. And so, yes, there are certain tasks and certain roles that are being replaced by AI. However, the concern isn't really new to our society. Like if you've seen that movie Hidden Figures,
Uh-huh.
where computers stepped in to compute what mathematicians were doing by hand. Um,
Mhm.
you know, what concerns me more is what's going to happen when the lights go off. Like people have to understand the processes and data sets that build AI, but are the people using AI going to understand that at a time when it's not available to them?
Oh,
So it's
yeah.
an interesting challenge. But the CEO of Three Motion AI, Reed Hanoun, has over 42 patents associated with his name, an amazing history of innovation in the health tech arena. Now, this technology has improved the provider, like he's had several different technologies before Three Motion AI, and I've used each one of those throughout my career.
Mhm.
And that technology has improved like the provider patient experience, outcomes over time, but it hasn't completely replaced it. So like in the dark ages, when we did office ergo assessments, we would get boots on the ground and go out and do like 1,000 ergo assessments with our clipboards and our,
Yeah.
pencils. And the thing about it is you can't possibly touch everyone that way. And everyone, you're repeating some of the same things over again and then customizing some things for people. But there's really kind of a danger in the consistency. So what technology allows providers to do is proactively create an enterprise view of an employer population, ensure compliance that each person's getting like the same baseline information and health and wellness you want them to have, but allows you to target your resources to really customize and intervene with people at a level where they need problem solving. It's kind of a trend in healthcare. They're calling like practicing at the top of your license, where
Mhm.
technology is doing parts that you don't necessarily have to, while you're really focusing on the patient or even the customer experience, depending on the type of AI that we're talking about. Um, AI is really augmenting where computers fell short. Like, you've been at a doctor's appointment where the doctor's head is like in the computer and they're trying to figure out the EMR and they're barely listening to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so when those processes can be streamlined, the professionals can be present. And I'm noticing like some professionals will have people doing their transcription or doing their documentation so they can
Mhm.
patient. So it particularly in the workplace, like with Three Motion AI technology, what we can do is use motion capture technology to assess risk basically for people of any level. So you could have a frontline supervisor, you could have someone from health and safety, you could even have employer leads who can use video to identify that preliminary risk, get a baseline score of whether a movement is good or bad, allow that data to flow up into a dashboard, and really allow for the management of resources to go and do deep dive assessments.
Right.
Because normally we go in and we might see one department or we might see a few employees, but this way you're really able to expand your reach in terms
Mhm.
of number of people who get information, the number of people you can touch, and then those areas that really need it, you can prioritize and methodically work down to eliminate the risk and eliminate the injuries.
Well, I mean, it also sounds like it's customized as well. It's not just a generic person trying to represent an entire workforce. It's Joe here is doing this. You're able to show Joe where he's perhaps out of alignment or doing something wrong and easy to correct. So maybe that makes it a little more palatable for people to have like the one-on-one connection there.
I equate it to golf. It's like swinging a golf club. Somebody tries to tell you what you're doing wrong, and it's nearly impossible to try to figure out how to position your body. Whereas now you can take a video, whether it's at work or sport or whatever it might be, and get a sense of how you're moving. And you're able to then really adjust in real time how you're moving to move it with better biomechanics or move in a healthier way.
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone should have that. So I'm going to move on to another question. I know back to the regulations and the complexity of what is all involved in that. As far as following regulations that require well-defined data practice where user information is carefully managed, how does that impact workers and management and the company as a whole? Specifically, I want to say since COVID, like everyone's regulations and protocols have changed considerably. And I like to think the nation or the world rather is looking at being more proactive and whatever's coming down the pipeline next versus reactive. So how do you think AI fits into this mold on a day-to-day basis?
So regulations around AI, like when it's too tight, it hinders innovation. It
Oh,
doesn't
sure.
allow people to move forward. And with the pace that technology and AI is advancing, when you stifle that, if you're too careful, it will pass you by, like that opportunity. Like there's
Mhm.
a lot of people who like to sit on the fence and say, well, I'll let somebody else go first. And when the research gets to this point, or the technology gets to this point, then I'll jump in. And then the issue is, as it's all advancing, it's like jumping on a moving train. Like at a
Mhm.
point, you have to try to learn something new or try something new to actually keep up with the development of where it's going. And with regulatory bodies, when you're evaluating technology, if it's specific to the workplace or otherwise, you have to understand who owns it, how it works, what is the intent of what it measures, and how it's pertinent to them, and then
Mhm.
be able to analyze what any possible adverse implications might be. And that has to do with how the data is used in terms of, let's say, identifying risk, or is it being used to determine employability, or is it being used, just that data usage. And it came up during the pandemic. It was so interesting. So I was contacted by many of my customers who were trying to use the technologies existing today that we use for biomechanics and for and really return to work for pandemic implications. Like, can I use this wearable sensor to make sure people are 6 feet apart? Or can I use this technology for contact tracing? Or can I use this, so I think it was a time globally where technology companies came together and said, oh, how can I kind of repurpose this technology I have to kind of help in this situation? And I think new technologies came of that. Some
Mhm.
technologies died from that. And other technologies were able to pivot, and be of benefit. But yeah, I know it was interesting to talk to various providers at that time. In terms of how the technology is being used, and what it allowed, like with Free Motion, is that a lot of consultants were not allowed boots on the ground at companies. So they were able to send videos and get videos analyzed from an ergonomic perspective and still contribute in the health and safety space that way.
Okay, nice. Um, what would you say is AI's current competition? So I know many companies tend to maintain a very traditional way in how they do production. We were working with a whiskey company that is still literally rolling the big barrels down planks versus utilizing machinery, which opens up a world of possibilities of injury, hand, back, whatever it might be. Um, how do you see that as far as breaking free of people who want to be in traditional production manners and how they create things?
I think it's almost in every industry, right? There's that boutique production or made by hand, but it's not scalable. So those may be, like, that whiskey might be more expensive than other whiskeys that are on the market. But I think for certain there's a difference generationally in terms of how we how we integrate technology. I mean, in our family, we have every generation, and every generation in our family uses technology,
Oh,
all,
sure.
all to differing degrees, one helping the other. But again, what concerns me is, and even in mentoring, I think some clinicians, is when an innovative process or a technology is put in place, ensuring that the people who are using it understand what it's comprised of, like what it does. Because
Mhm.
sometimes it's easy just to take a technology and be like, oh, I don't have to do that because the technology does it for me. But if you don't understand fundamentally how it's comprised or how it's used, then it becomes an issue of um not being able to do that particular task or service when the technology is not there. So, like, a good example of this, like maybe the easiest, and I was talking to my own children about this, is people see each other less. And they're saying that younger generations are less comfortable networking and talking to people because you're so used to the technology. Just
Oh, I
the
can see that. Yeah.
skill of talking to people and interacting with people, and that aspect of things is more difficult for younger generations that have had technology in their hands since they were walking. So it can be a challenge, from that networking and the communication perspective.
So I've done talks at various conferences where one of my topics was how do you approach various generations when for anything, whether it's AI or just different protocols or what have you. It's how do people learn? So how do you deal with the various generations? Does the baby boomer respond differently to AI versus a millennial versus? Gen X, what have you. Um, what's the best way to go about getting people's responses to be something that'll stay in their head and they'll understand based off of how they learn things?
I think listening is key and understanding like where they are in terms of their understanding of the technology, what their desire is for the technology. I mean, some people want to use it and they really don't care how it works. It's like, give me
Sure.
the solution and I don't care about all the rest of it. I'm just going to trust you to do that. So I think we'll see very often in large projects with corporations that they'll put the interns or the students or the younger generation people in charge of it, even though it's being overseen perhaps by a senior person. But then
Mm,
it depends on I would say the flexibility and risk-taking capabilities of the individual, because it doesn't mean that you're not going to see someone in their 50s or 60s leading a technology project. Um, I don't think like going to school was it was a little like eye-opening, even bruising at times, because multi-generationally in school, you talk about business strategy, and there's well out folks in there who are like, oh, if you're a certain age, like you're out, like we're just gonna go with the people we're comfortable with, and we need to move
mhm.
kind of get folks out of the way.
You've aged out of the business almost.
Pretty much. So I think it's understanding the needs of each generation and how they view things and being able to communicate in effective ways.
Okay,
Um,
that makes sense. So with that, like we see in our work that there can be some resistance to new tech as they find it difficult to see it as an added value form to what they already do. So what advice would you give management to introduce new tech? How do we incorporate it?
Um, I always encourage people to try something new every day. And I've seen this pushback, whether it comes to a new approach to something or whether it comes to technology. It's like, okay, this is what we're proposing. This is the proposed value. Let's test it and let's come back and see what you think. And so it does, I think from a corporate standpoint, I found it beneficial to implement programs from the top down, even
Mhm.
companies, sites have individual decision-making rights, because if you have that support, you've set your KPIs, you have things that you can measure, then you implement that program, you can always come back and measure or adjust against those KPIs. But for people who are using the technology, they have to see the value like boots on the ground. And so being with employees and showing them how they move and then instructing them in a different way of moving, and they see that immediate result. When they see that, like you can say anything you want, but when they see that result, that's when you're going to get the buy.
So is there a disconnect in for example, our cell phones are constantly, pinging us with update, 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 which eventually you have to do because your phone's just not going to keep up to whatever's being moved forward. So as tech evolves, um, and you do have it introduced into the workplace, how do you keep up with keeping your workforce up to par and up to speed on what's changing and happening versus the next update that happens to be in the tech? It's not like you create your tech to do one thing. I would imagine, as we've spoken previously, that there's constantly upgrades, new ads, different variations of things that make it bigger, better, easier to use. If the rate of teaching and creating the environment for your workers is, I'm going to say almost probably a little bit slower than how the tech is coming out new and improved, how do you bridge that gap?
Um, so communication is key, obviously, but if
Sure.
they're using it and they're engaging with that tech, they're going to pick up those enhancements as they happen.
Okay.
And I liken it to like the different platforms we've used over time with the pandemic, like Zoom or like Teams. You go in and you're doing something, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, look at that, there's a new feature. So if they're engaged with that technology and find value in it,
Mhm.
those particular upgrades should automatically flow with the tech, if that makes sense.
So it shouldn't be so out of the scope of, oh my gosh, what is this? It should be just kind of an easy step up, right?
It should be logical, but
Okay.
then what happens sometimes is if you don't pay attention, like you upgrade, like let's say you upgrade your phone and you don't read the release notes or don't do this. Like sometimes you don't realize features that you have, and so that's why it's important to always
100%.
periodically go back. Like, and you see it more often, like when people I noticed it a while ago when people are out, you might be like talking about something or admiring this or that, but I'll catch, more often than not, people like, how'd you just do that on your phone? Or I was
Yes.
going
Yeah.
on a business trip and I had a different phone and I was doing something. This man next to me is like, you're kidding me, you're not swiping? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, you shouldn't be trying to text that way, like here. And he showed me how to swipe. He almost couldn't stand seeing me sit there trying to enter,
How dare you be antiquated?
sometimes you're like voluntold, and this was quite a while ago. So sometimes you're just voluntold on new things where, you're going about your business, doing things as you normally do. And then, oh, well, that certainly is a lot easier. So I think that's where technology provides us insights and sometimes things that we don't expect. And I've seen this in, using technology for ergonomic assessment and looking at things. And sometimes like when you walk in, the more experience you have, you're almost predisposed on what you expect to see. Like, oh,
Mhm.
it's manufacturing situation, and these are the 100 things I've done before, and this is what I might expect to see. Whereas with technology, it's kind of a slate, like it's giving you data, and you have to
Mhm.
that data to look at it. And sometimes that data says something different than what you expected. And I think that's what I appreciate most about technology is the knowledge I might have, but what it shows me that I wouldn't have necessarily seen without it.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, to be perfectly honest, every time I do a phone update, I don't read release anything. I just like to be pleasantly surprised at the new things that I can do. How
I have to admit, I'm kind of bad. Like I don't read directions. I'm one to just go in and kind of play with it.
hard could this
So,
be? Let's just figure it out.
mhm. Yeah, it doesn't always work, but a lot of the times it does.
All right, I'm going to wrap this up with one more question for you. What three high value ads do you see for those folks who've had a robust injury prevention program already?
Um, So I'm going to focus on I would say to focus as much on asking the right questions as
Mhm.
the particular answers. Like where do we know where our blind spots are? Like what insight could this technology possibly bring? What does it measure? Is it relevant actually to our business need? I think technology, as we just discussed, adds insights that you don't expect. So to be open and to kind of play with implementation of the technology as it advances and don't wait until it's perfect or it will pass you by. I mean, we were talking about, I go back to like very early in my career. I had a doctor kind of, call me in the office and say, look, how can we improve people's ability to be compliant with their exercise program? Like, I wish we could just put a camera in their house and I could have you talk to them through the camera and do their exercises. And here we are today, all these years later, is exactly what we can do and allow people to engage with their own data and their experience. So it's just pretty incredible. The advances that are required across all the different technologies, the camera quality, the video quality, we have the sensor and skin um, technology we have to be able to monitor biometrics. Like there are just so many things that we can measure now today with technology. That the aim is that we're able to advance health and wellness for people in a
Mhm.
very equitable and sustainable way. So
Wonderful. So it's something to be AI in general is something to be embraced and meant to help at the end of the day. So I feel like everyone's got to get on board. It's going to make life easier to some degree. So
and when there's new features, and you tell people new features, sometimes it like takes a minute. And that's where, culture, and when you talk about different generations, you have to
mhm.
consider the person's experience, you have to consider their generation. But the most recent thing that we can do now through machine learning and AI is that we can take a video, like a single camera video, it can digitize the skeleton, it goes through an algorithm and a layer of machine learning to be digitized into a 3D avatar, which we can then manipulate and measure from all different angles with an incredible level of accuracy. And people
Yeah.
just sit and think, huh? And then they have to see it and then they have to touch it. I think we just live in a very exciting time where technology and AI continues to advance. And, I just kind of look forward to how it's going to develop in ways we can't imagine. And
Mhm.
hope it allows us to kind of keep some guardrails around it for our safety, security, and sanity.
Well, Ms. Lisa, I appreciate you taking the time today to chat with me about all things AI. If anybody has any questions regarding 3Motion and wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
They can reach us through our website, which
Okay.
is 3motionai.com. And fill out the information sheet and get in touch with us directly that way. You can also email me at lisa.krefft@3motionai.com, or a direct number is 708-259-2523.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to thank you again for being on the Injury Prevention Academy. My name is Cheryl, and this is Lisa Krefft, fellow lover of the Kate Spade handbag and general good person. Thank you so much,
Always a
Lisa.
pleasure. Yeah.